بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. اللهم زدنا علما إنك أنت عليم الحكيم. اللهم اجعل هذه محاضرة حجة لنا لا حجة علينا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to talk about a very important topic. A topic that apparently a lot of people have questions about. It's also a topic that we may have discussed this previously in the past, but sometimes maybe we just need a reminder or a refresher. And so today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to give a very detailed explanation, inshallah, of the ruling on a woman that is fasting while she is pregnant. Should she feed? Does she have to make the days up, etc.? And this is due partly because yesterday, or was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, a brother, he had a question about his wife. How many people does she have to feed? And I'm thinking to myself, well, why does she have to feed? And then it just led to a whole conversation. So we're going to do, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to start with Surah Al-Baqarah. And this is how we're going to explain this. We're going to start with the evidence, the dalil, Quran and Sunnah. And then we're going to finish off with some of the statements of the scholars as it relates to extracting verdicts from the Quran. All right? Any questions before we get started? Right. If I were to ask any of you, just starting off, what's the ruling on a sister being pregnant? Does she have to fast? If she's pregnant, does she have to fast? Yes or no? She does. All right. Some say no, some say yes. Does she have to make her fast up if she misses it? Yes or no? Can she feed people instead of fasting? Or instead of making her days up? Yes or no? No. Huh? I'm not sure. You're not sure. Any of you brothers married?
No, I'm not.
Anybody got kids? Dang. I'm not gonna put you on the spot. But are you guys familiar with this issue?
I got a niece that's pregnant, and we was just going over that too. We were just asking that question.
Okay.
Did she have to fast or not? And the same thing came up. Some sisters told her no.
Sister told she didn't have to fast.
Some said no.
Okay.
Some said yes.
Thank you. So if everyone, all of this is coming from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 182 up to verse number 185. Everything we're going to talk about is coming from Surah Al-Baqarah. Before we get started, we're going to read through these ayat, and then we'll come back to it again. Okay? We'll read through the ayat, and then we'll come back to it again. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu. Now, in this first ayah here, salam tallah, it mentions the obligation of fasting in Ramadan. However, 30 days was not obligatory at that time. Just fast some of it, right? So Allah says, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. It has become obligatory for you to fast. Now, this is not fasting every day, though. This is some days. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Just like it was prescribed for you, it was prescribed for the people that came before you. By chance, you may be successful. That's the first part. So then, what do we understand from that first ayah? Ayah 182? That fasting was made obligatory, but it wasn't made obligatory every day. Right? Actually, some say this could have been for Yom Ashura, right? Because that was the first fast. That was obligatory. The second fast, it says, ayamin ma'dudat. Some of the ulama say in this ayah is referring to 3 days, right? Ayamun or ayaman ma'dudat. Faman kana minkum marida. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you have been required to fast a select amount of days. And then Allah says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا. Whoever from among you are sick, أو عَلَى سَفَرٍ, or they are traveling. This is important to note. Sick and traveling. Okay? Allah says, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Allah says, in this case, you have to make those days up at a later date. Who? Who has to make their days up? The one that is sick and the one that is what? Traveling, mumtaz. And then we get to the last part. Then Allah says, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ. And as for those who are able to fast but just don't, because they don't want to, فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Then you have to feed. So during that time, fasting was obligatory, but if you didn't want to fast, you can do what instead of fasting? You can feed. So you had a choice, mukhayyir. Your option was either you're going to fast or you're going to what? Feed. This is what this ayah says. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. And then Allah says, فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. And Allah says, whoever wants to do more, meaning do more than feeding one person, feed multiple people, then this is good. And then Allah says, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. However, fasting is better for you. إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If you only know. Okay? So, the first part, the first ayah lets us know that fasting was made obligatory. 1 day. Then, parts of Ramadan, or later on it became obligatory, but it was certain days. And then Allah lets us know that if you can't fast those days, you can do what? No. Before the feeding. If you can't fast those days because you are sick or traveling, then what? Then you make those days up later. And then the last part of that ayah says, and if you're able to fast, but you don't want to fast, then you have to do what? Feed. You have to feed a person for each day. Are we clear on that so far? Tight. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed another ayah. Allah says, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. Allah says, the month of Ramadan, the Quran was revealed in this month to mankind, and it is a guidance, and it allows a person to determine that which is right and incorrect. It's a guidance. And then Allah says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Allah says, whoever from among you witness this month, then you have to fast it. Now, fasting the month of Ramadan has become what? A wajib, obligatory upon who? Everyone, right? He says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Whoever sees this month, then it is obligatory that they fast. And then Allah says, فَلْيَصُمْهُ. And then Allah says, وَمَنْ كَانَ مُرِيدًا. Now he's back to what? وَمَنْ كَانَ مُرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Same thing applies. Now, for the one who fasts the whole month of Ramadan, Allah says, whoever is sick and whoever is traveling, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Then you make those days up at another time. Is that clear? All right. That's also very important. فَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. And then Allah says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ease for us, and He doesn't want difficulty for us to the end of the ayah. All right. Does everyone understand thus far? All right. Now we're going to have a conversation, and then we're going to get into some more detail. A pregnant woman. So the way Islam works is, right, a person always fits into a category. If a person can't fast, the ulama, they're always going to put him into a category. What's the category? Huh? Sick or what? Or traveling. Any person that cannot fast, you fall into one or two categories. Either you are sick or you are what? Traveling. Based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. فَعِدَّةٌ. It says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. Now, Maridan is different types of sicknesses. Traveling, there's different types of travels. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. This means that when you are traveling and when you're in this space and you're sick, then you make them up at a different date. Now, what does that have to do with a woman that's pregnant and breastfeeding? One has nothing to do with the other. Wait a minute. We're going to get there. It's a build-up. So, in Arabic, a woman that is pregnant, she is considered to be hamil. And a woman that is breastfeeding, she is considered to be murdi', meaning she is breastfeeding, right? The ulama of Islam, they say both of these women, the one that is pregnant and the one that is breastfeeding, yalhaqani bil marid, that they will take the ruling of a person that is sick or traveling. They will take the ruling of what? A person that is sick or traveling. So we know that they're not traveling, so then they will have to fall under the ruling of what? The one that is sick. Right. If a person is sick in Islam, there are two types of sicknesses. How many types? Two types of sicknesses. The first type of sickness is a sickness that a person will eventually be cured from. Right? The first type of sickness is a sickness that a person can be cured from. In this case, this applies to the ayah. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. Then you make those days up later. Make sense? So if you're sick, and it's a type of sickness that eventually, inshallah, you will be cured from. It's a curable illness. Then you have to make those days up later. Well, what happens to a person that does not have a curable illness? Rather, it's terminal, or it's something that will stay with you forever and you will never be able to fast. What's the ruling on that person? They have to feed. But where does that come from? Where does that come from? Where's the evidence to support that? We're going to read the ayah again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Allah says, as for the one that is able, when they have a choice, right? They can choose to fast or not choose to fast. It says that this person has to feed poor people. Now, if a person's listening to this ayah, they're going to say, it doesn't say that in English, though. That's not what it means, right? If you read it, it doesn't necessarily say if you can't. So then what's the ruling on this ayah? This ayah in the Quran is considered to be mansukh. What does mansukh mean? Mansukh means that this ayah has been abrogated. Meaning the meaning of this actual ayah right here in the Quran is no longer valid. However, what is valid from this meaning in the Quran is that the scholars apply this to a shaykhun kabir, to an elderly person. An elderly person that has no opportunity to regain their health to the extent enough where they can fast, then this ayah applies to them. Then they must feed a poor person. Is that clear? They must feed a poor person for every day that they are what? For every day. Every day that a person is supposed to fast. Is that clear? Is that clear? Right. So let's back up. So, a pregnant woman, if she's pregnant and breastfeeding, she's going to fall in one of two categories. A sick person, right? Either she's sick and she's not going to be cured, or she's sick and there will be a cure. And when we say sick, they're considered pregnancy. They're making qiyas. They're making analytical deduction to compare a pregnant woman to being sick. Okay? All right. If that's the case, which category does she fall in? The first category is sickness, where there will be a potential cure, or the second category of sickness where there won't be a cure. In this case, she must what? Feed every day. The first category. Is that clear? All right. So what we're going to do, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to read a little bit of the tafsir on this particular ayah. I just wanted to give everyone a synopsis really quick, and then we're going to read through the text, some of the tafsir on this. And it's very extensive, where we want to pull out parts that is applicable to what we have to deal with now. But before they get into the breastfeeding woman or the pregnant woman, you have to understand the ayat. What is it talking about, right? So, and you can look this up. This is in Tafsir Ibn Kathir. In Tafsir Ibn Kathir, it's in English. That's why we use this one, because a person can go look this up on their own. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Whoever is sick or is traveling, then they make it up another day. It says, الْمَرِيدُ وَالْمُسَافِرُ لَا يَصُومَانِ فِي حَالِ الْمَرْضِ وَالسَّفَرِ. If a person is sick, they're not going to fast while they're traveling or they currently have a sickness. Is that clear? Right. It says, for the one, فَأَمَّا الصَّحِيحِ الْمُقِيمَ الَّذِي يُطِيقُ الصِّيَامِ فَقَدْ كَانَ مُخَيَّرًا بَيْنَ الصِّيَامِ وَبَيْنَ الْإِطْعَامِ. When that ayah was revealed, a person had an option to either fast or feed. We're talking about that other ayah. A person had the option to fast or feed. Now, before we continue, did I lose anybody? No. You sure? Is anybody lost? If you lost, it's okay. Anybody? So everybody understands?
No, can you double back for me one more time?
Which part?
The whole.
From the very beginning?
The very beginning of the tafsir.
All right. From the beginning of the tafsir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Allah says, whoever is sick or is traveling, then they don't have to fast if they are sick or traveling, that they are to make it up at a later date. It said, with that comes a level of difficulty. This is why it's difficult, right? And then it says, what is correct is that a person that is able to fast, this is during the previous legislation, a person that is able to fast, they had an option to either fast or what? Or feed. When Allah says, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ, as for the one that is able to fast, then they had an option of either fasting or feeding. Is that clear? All right. So, the question now is this. What did we learn? We learned that a woman that is pregnant or breastfeeding, she can fall into one or two categories. What are those two categories? Either she's sick or she's what? Traveling. All right, well, we know she's not traveling, so then she has to fall under the what? The sick. If she's sick, then sickness also has two categories. What's the first category of being sick? Huh? Curable sickness. And what's the second category of being sick? I'm sorry? Non-curable, right? All right. If it's a curable sickness, then what's the ruling on her fast? She should make it up later. And if it's an incurable illness, then what should she do? Is this just for a pregnant person or is this for anybody that's considered sick? Huh? Any sick Muslim. Okay? All right. Any questions about that? All right. So what we want to do is we're going to read. Yes.
This is a question, but more of a statement. What about people who may, I'm pregnant, I'm sick, and I'm going to attempt? Is it better for them to attempt because they?
Shuf, listen to this. Every person will know their own body, right? If a woman is sick, or let's just say if she's pregnant and she fears for herself and her child, etc., then she doesn't have to fast. This is the ease of Islam. The issue now is, does she have to make that fast up, or can she just feed without making the fast up? That's the issue we're discussing today. All right. So for those people that say that all she has to do is feed and she doesn't have to make the fast up, where are they getting that text from? Where does that come from? Even though it's a position, it's a position. We're going to mention that too. I'm not just giving you one side. I'm going to give you the whole side. Yes?
Now, does it go for feeding fasting Muslims or feeding people in general?
No, it's feeding Muslims. For this here, for Ramadan, it's feeding Muslims. Why? Because Muslims are fasting. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to read or go through the different positions of it now so that it makes sense. So as we discuss it, I wanted to give everyone, some foundational information, and then now we start going to the different positions, right? Because the reason why I'm even mentioning this is because from what's apparent, to us is that this is a issue here in this city where a lot of women believe that once they're pregnant, all they have to do is feed people and they don't have to fast, right? So we're going to read. Now, there's a difference of opinion. I'm just giving you guys what I just covered was what we studied. And then we're going to give you the different positions, and then we're going to give you some of the strong positions with particular scholars. I have to clarify that. Strong positions with some particular scholars. Okay? طيب. اختلف العلماء في حكم حامل والمرضع إذا أفطرتا على عدة أقوال. So the scholars of Islam, they differ as it relates to a pregnant woman and a breastfeeding woman of different statements. The first position, and I want you guys to understand, there's three positions I'm going to mention here. The first position, it says, عليهم القضاء فقط. The first position is that if a woman is breastfeeding or she's pregnant, if she cannot fast, she has to make it up. Everyone here should understand the evidence for making up the fast, correct? Mumtaz. This is the madhab of Imam Abi Hanifa. And this is also the madhab of some of the Sahaba. From them is Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala an. Are we clear? You guys already understand the dalil because the evidence came from where? The Quran. Tayyib, Mumtaz. Tayyib. As it relates to a woman fasting while she's pregnant, it is her option. It's optional. If she knows that it's going to be harmful for herself and her baby, then she shouldn't fast. Islam is easy. Islam is easy. The second position, القول الثاني إن خافتا على أنفسهما. If the woman is fearful for herself and the child, فعليهم القضاء فقط. Then she has to make it up. She only has to make it up. وإن خافتا على والديهما فعليهما القضاء وإطعام مسكين عن كل يوم. All right, so it says, the second position is if she fears the breastfeeding woman and the pregnant woman, if she fears for themselves, then they have to make the day up. This is the second position. And it says, if they both fear for their children, the babies, then they have to make it up and they have to feed. They have to make it up and they have to feed, right? They have to feed a poor person for each day. And this is the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Ahmed. وحكاه جصاص عن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى. Jassas, he has Ahkam al-Quran, tafsir, and that was the position he got from Ibn Umar. Ibn Umar is who? The son of Umar ibn Khattab. These are companions. So right now we see that what? We have two companions that what? That differ. Two companions that differ. Tayyib, Mumtaz. The third position. Alayhim al-it'am faqat. The third position is that they only feed and they don't have to make anything up. It says, وَلَا قَضَى عَلَيْهِمَا وَقَالَ بِهِ مِنَ الصَّحَابَةِ. Some of the Sahaba said this too. From them, Abdullah ibn Abbas, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And you can also find this in Ibn Qudam and his Mughni, and Ibn Umar also said this. So right now, we have three different positions. What were the three different positions? Who remembers? No, the first one is that you what? That you have to make it up. The second position was that you have to make it up and feed if you're only doing it because of fear for your child. And the third position is what? You just have to what? Feed. All right. Now we're going to talk about some of this with some evidence, some more evidence to go with the Quran that we already mentioned. روى أبو داود عن ابن عباس where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين. All right. Remember when I told you guys in that ayah where Allah says, and as for the ones that are able to, then they pay the penalty by feeding the people? Remember when I told you, we mentioned this ayah? Right. They say that this ayah was abrogated. قالت كانت رخصة للشيخ الكبير. This ayah is a ruqsa or an exception for the elderly man and woman because they are sick and what? They're sick and old and they can't what? They're not going to be able to fast later. So for them, فَهُمَا يُطِيقَانَ الصِّيَامِ and يُفْطِرَا وَيُطْعِمَا مَكَانَ كُلِّ يَوْمٍ مِسْكِينًا. As for the elderly man and woman, then they break their fast and they feed people for each day. And then he says, in this hadith, they compare this to the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman. It says, وَحُبْلَ وَمُرْدِعْ إِذَا خَافَتَا قال أبو داود يعني على أولادهما أفطرتا وأطعمتا قال النووي إسناده صحيح. In this hadith, that's authentic according to Imam al-Nawawi, he said that if a pregnant woman or a breastfeeding woman, if they fear for their child or fear for themselves or they fear for their children, then they are to break their fast and to feed. أفطرتا وأطعمتا. That's the position of who? Imam al-Shafi. So then, here in this position, Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If a breastfeeding woman, it says that if she fears for her children, aftarata, then she breaks her fast and she feeds for each day. And this is the position of Imam al-Nawawi, and this is the narration that they use. This hadith was reported in Abu Dawud. So that means that if people take that position, they have a salaf. They have someone that came before them, right? طيب. And another hadith. أخرج البزار وزاد في آخره وكان ابن عباس يقول لأم ولد له حبلى أنت بمنزلة التي لا يطيقونه فعليك الفداء ولا قضاء عليك والصح دار قطني إسناد. So the same position. A bazar he mentioned in his book of hadith, a similar thing that was mentioned in the previous one. If you can't do it, if you are in the state where you لا يطيقونه فعليك الفداء, so they have to pay the fidya. The fidya is feeding people. And there is no qada, meaning she does not have to make it up. That's one position. طيب. The next one. اختلف السلف في ذلك على ثلاثة أوجه. The Salaf, meaning from the companions, they differ on these issues with three different ways of looking at it. I don't want to confuse anybody, but we got to talk about it because this is an issue that's prevalent. A lot of people have different positions, but now we need to understand why, where these positions come from. قال علي عليهم القضاء إذا أفطرتا ولا فدية عليهما. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says that rather no, this is not correct, whether they have to make up their fast and they don't have to pay a penalty for it. Is that clear? They have to make up their fast and they don't have to pay a penalty for it. And then some of the ulama say something totally opposite. So what we're going to do is we're going to, without getting into a lot of the details of that, we're going to mention a position of Sheikh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala. Sheikh Ibn Baz is from the modern scholars who died about 20 plus years ago. 20 plus years ago? Yeah. He says, Al-Hamil wal-Murdi' Hukmuhuma hukm murid. He says a breastfeeding woman and a pregnant woman, they take the ruling of a sick person. We already established that, correct? All right. He says, إِذَا شَقَّ عَلَيْهِمَا الصَّوْمُ شَرْعَ لَهُمَا الْفَطْرُ. If it is difficult for them to fast, then they should do what? No. If it's difficult for them to fast, then they should what? They shouldn't fast. If it's difficult for them to fast, they shouldn't fast. وَعَلَيْهِمُ الْقَضَاء عِنْدَ الْقَدْرِ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. And they should make their fast up later. He says, just like the sick person. Ibn Abbas said they have to make it up just like the sick person. وَذَهَبَ بَعْضَ أَهْلُ الْعِلْمِ إِلَى أَنَّهُ يَكْفِي إِطْعَامًا كُلِّ يَوْمٍ. He said, however, some scholars say that if they feed a person for each day, then that is sufficient. According to Imam Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Abbas, he says that huwa qawl da'if, marjuh. He said this is a weak position and it's refuted. This is according to Sheikh bin Baz. This is according to who? Sheikh bin Baz. Sheikh bin Baz, he says that this position is weak. Why? He says, rather, what is correct, and alayhim al-qadha ka-musaf wa murid. He said, what's correct is that they have to make it up, just like the traveling person and a person that is sick. And this is due to the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. He said, whoever is sick or traveling, then they have to make those days up later. That's according to Sheikh ibn Baz. Another thing, we have the Majmu' Fatawa. It says, as-sawab, needs to also talk about this issue. As-sawab fi hadha inna ala al-hama wal murdi al-qada. And this is Majmu' Fatawa from Sheikh al-Islam. He said that what is correct is that a pregnant woman and a breastfeeding woman, she should make that up. وما يروى عن ابن عباس عن ابن عمر أن الحام ومرضع الإطعام هو قول مرجوح مخالف للأدلة الشرعية. Now, according to Sheikh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he mentions here whoever the position that a pregnant woman or a breastfeeding woman should just feed. He says that this goes against the evidence in the Sharia. He says, rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Whoever is sick or is traveling, then they make those days up at another time. This is what the evidence says, right? طيب. وَالْحَامُ وَالْمُرْضِعُ تَلْحَقَانِ بِالْمَرِيضِ. As for the pregnant person and the breastfeeding woman, they take the position of the one that is fasting. And al-hukmu shaykh al-kabir al-ajiz bal huma fil hukm murid. The same thing for an elderly person that can't fast, they take the position of the sick person, right? And there's no hope for their cure. So in this case, they are to feed. What time is he there? So we got a couple minutes. Right. So we have a fatwa, Lajnat Da'ima. The Lajnat Da'ima was a group of major or elderly or elder scholars in Saudi Arabia. They also have another position on this, which is similar. It says, in khafat al-hamil, if a pregnant woman fears for herself or her child from fasting a month of Ramadan, she should break her fast, but she has to make it up. And he said her condition is similar to the sick person that does not have the strength to fast or is fearful that they will be harmed. And this is due to what Allah says, وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا, whoever is sick or is traveling, then they make it up at a later date. And then he also says, and likewise, the breastfeeding woman. The breastfeeding woman, if she fears for herself or fear for the child by fasting the month of Ramadan, or she fears for her child alone if she fasts, then she should what? Break her fast, and she should make her fast up. She should make her fast up. And another group of fatwa, it says a pregnant woman, it is obligatory for her to fast while she's able to fast, except that she fears for herself by fasting. Does that make sense? Meaning, a pregnant woman, it's obligatory for her to fast unless she can't fast. If she can't fast due to her pregnancy or she fears for her child, he says, for yurakhasu, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for her that she could break her fast. وَتَقْضِي بَعْدَ أَن تَضَعَ حَمْلَهَا, and that she makes her days up after she has the child. She makes her days up after she has the child. And he says, وَلَا يُجْزِئَهَا الْإِطْعَامَ عَنْ الصِّيَامِ بَلْ لَا بُدَّ مِنَ الصِّيَامِ وَيَكْفِيهَا عَنِ الْإِطْعَامِ. It says, and she cannot give food, she cannot feed people in hopes that will suffice her from fasting. Right. Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions in his Sharh al-Mumti', same thing. It says, بعد أن أذكر الاختلاف العلماء في الحكم المسألة واختار أن عليهم القضاء فقط. Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said after extensively reading through the differences of opinion in this issue, he said for him, the best position is that a woman should make those days up. And he says, هذا قول أرجح الأقوال عندي. He said this is the strongest position with him, with Sheikh Uthaymeen. Not you, not him, with Sheikh Uthaymeen. He says, لِأَنْ غَايَةَ مَا يَكُونُ أَنَّهُمَا كَمُرِيدٍ. He said, because usually a woman like that, she takes the position of a person that is sick or traveling. And in either case, they're both required to make the fast up. Now, if you have to feed somebody, if you're sick, you have a certain sickness and you have to feed, what is the amount of food that you have to feed someone? They say, yes. They say nisfu sa'a. What is a sa'a? Does anyone know what a sa'a is? It's 4. So a sa'a is a mud. Two hands together is considered 1 mud. A sa'a is 4 scoops with 2 hands. It's 4 scoops with 2 hands, right? Nisfu sa'a is half of that. That's how much you have to feed a poor person each day. You can feed them cooked meals. You can feed them whatever, right? I mean, not whatever, but something that's nourishing. Any questions about that? I know we went for a little while. Any questions?
So the sa'a is 2 months?
Yes, a sa'a is 2 months, yes. Salam to Allah. No. Sheikh Uthaymeen's position is a position of Sheikh bin Baz and a position of Sheikh al-Islam, and that is that a pregnant, breastfeeding woman, she has to make those days up later. She cannot feed in lieu of fasting. She cannot do that. Rather, she has to make those days up. She has to make those days, yes.
The Sheikh al-Islam said that it went against
The Sharia. That's his position, though. Mind you, and this is not to shoot down the other position, because they said it's weak, it doesn't mean that there are other companions that held that position, right? But every position has to be measured against what? The Quran and the Sunnah. And I'm not saying we know more Quran and Sunnah than their companions, but I'll tell you this. One of the ulama, one of the judges we used to study with, he said to a couple of the students, he said, "Alayka bil khilaf al-jamhur." He said, I warn you against going against the majority of the scholars of the past on some of these issues, even if there's a position on it. The reason is that if you got companions that say this and companions that say that, and they differ, and you looking at it and you don't really understand, to me, I'm going to go with the majority of companions on it, especially if I don't really understand the issue, right? And inshallah khair. Any event, we're going to stop with that. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.